Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be launching the African Scholars Program for the Learning for All initiative, or as we like to call it, LAI. LAI is managed by the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL, and is generously funded by a couple of donors, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Douglas B. Marshall Family Foundation, Echidna Giving, the FCTO, Founders Pledge, and the Lego Foundation. My name is Anushka Bansal, and I'm a Senior Policy Associate at JPAL. Joining me today are my colleagues Maddie Bransell, Eitan Paul, Demi Wack, and Jess Williams from the Global Office, and Claire Hoffmeyer and Raquel Caldera from the Africa Office. So before we begin, I'd just like to go over some housekeeping requests. This session will be recorded and sent out to everyone after the webinar, so you can have access to it anytime. We welcome you to post your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function that you will see at the bottom of the screen rather than using the chat. Our staff will be monitoring the Q&A and will respond throughout, but we would also reserve some time at the end to have a dedicated Q&A session. We request that the questions you ask today are about more general topics that will benefit the group as a whole. And if you have any specific questions about your proposals or projects, you are most welcome to direct them to us via email after the call. So with that, I'll just start us off with an overview of our organization and our main methodological tool, and then hand it over to Demi for an introduction to LAI's research agenda. From there, we'll describe the program components. Claire and Raquel will talk about application tips and tricks, and then we'll review next steps before opening up for a Q&A. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about who we are and what we do. For those of you who may not be as familiar with JPAL and our work, JPAL is a global research center working to reduce poverty by ensuring that policy is informed by scientific evidence and that research is translated into action. One of the main ways we do this is through our research initiatives, of which LAI is one, as you already know. We work with a network of about 900 researchers across 90 leading universities, and we use randomized evaluations to generate evidence on effective approaches to reduce poverty. In addition to our global office at MIT, where most of my global colleagues are based, we also have 7 regional offices and many more satellite offices around the world. Our teams in these local offices understand local issues, contexts, and languages and form close relationships with partners like governments, advocacy organizations, and NGOs to build up a culture of evidence-informed policymaking throughout the world. So JPAL researchers have run more than 1,600 randomized evaluations in more than 95 countries around the world. And at JPAL, we work across multiple programmatic areas or sectors in which research is concentrated around a specific topic. LAI that we're going to talk about today sits within the education sector. So for the education sector and LAI, we are led by 3 academic co-chairs, Rachel Glenister, who's based at the University of Chicago, Karthik Muralidharan, who's based at the University of California, San Diego, and Karen McCours at the Paris School of Economics. Specifically for the African Scholars Program of LAI, you can expect Raquel and I to be your primary points of contact. You will see us answering your emails, reaching out during the application process, and just generally here to help you. We will be supported by Claire, Eitan, and Maddie as advisors, and Demi as the initiative manager for LAI. At the heart of the approach is the use of randomized evaluations, which I've been talking about is the main methodological tool that we use for LAI as well as JPAL. It is probably familiar to most of us in the room, but for those less familiar, I'm just going to walk us through a brief example. So what randomized evaluations basically do is they help us disentangle the effects of a program from other factors that might affect the outcome or outcomes of interest. Let's talk about a math tutoring program as an example. So let's say you're trying to understand how a math tutoring program affects students' test scores. You determine the eligibility requirements such that only students with test scores below a certain cutoff are eligible to receive the tutoring program. Within this group, there will be variation in terms of students' characteristics. So some students will be stronger students overall, denoted here by the dark orange color, and then some students will be weaker students, denoted by the light orange color. So in this case, how do we measure impact? We would like to know how much the change in test scores is actually attributable to the math tutoring program versus other factors such as access to resources at home or some other factors that we cannot observe, like how motivated the students are themselves. One option would be to let school officials determine who in this eligible population would receive extra tutoring and then compare the outcomes to another group of eligible students who did not receive it. So in this case, the school officials might assign tutoring to those they feel need it the most, so the weakest students. Yet this means that the students who receive the program are systematically different, in this case, systematically weaker from those who do not. As a result, we will not be able to disentangle the effect of the program from the effect of students' inherent abilities and other factors on their test scores. For example, it could be that the program was really effective and that the students would not have done well without it. Or it could be that the students would have caught up anyway and the program did not actually do much. Instead, what we would need is to compare how the students would have done with the program to how they would have done without the program. And this is what we call the counterfactual. So in an ideal world, we would observe the counterfactual by seeing how a group of students did with the tutoring program and then going back in time and seeing how the same students would do without the program. But this, of course, is impossible, and we cannot achieve but we can achieve a similar goal by randomly assigning individuals to either receive the program, which we call the intervention group, or to not receive the program, which we call the comparison group. How does this work in practice? So before a program starts, individuals are randomly assigned to two different groups. In expectation, the two groups have comparable characteristics at baseline. So what we are trying to do here is we are trying to do an apples to apples comparison. Because the only systematic difference between the two groups is the presence of the program, we can assume that they are comparable in terms of the average individual characteristics and then attribute the difference in outcomes to the intervention with a high degree of confidence. So in other words, it is a long-winded way of saying that randomization allows a causal interpretation of the difference between the intervention and the comparison group. So thank you for sitting with me through that refresher. This is relevant because the use of randomized evaluations is what unites the network of researchers at JPAL. While we focus on RCTs because they are a rigorous way to identify causality, there are, of course, restrictions to consider when deciding if an RCT is right for a given program. And this is something that we can help you with at the pre-proposal stage. We will cover this more in detail in the other parts of the presentation. Under LAI, randomized evaluation is the methodology we focus on and fund to answer our research questions. And from here, I would hand it over to my colleague Demi, who will share a bit more about the goals of the initiative and what are the specific research questions that we want under LAI. So, Demi, I pass it on to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anishka. And thank you everyone for taking the time to be on this call. It's really, really exciting. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Great. Okay, so as Anushka previewed, there are several sectors at JPAL, and they cover a range of different topics, as you may know. And many of our sectors have seen a need to catalyze more evidence where there's like existing research gaps, and now host like a range of funding schemes for different research, which fall under the whole title of initiatives. And that's sort of where LAI comes in. So on the education sector, we've seen that despite an increase in school enrollment over the last decade, that learning levels have still remained really low. And the Learning for All initiative has come in to help set out and uncover ways in which to improve student learning and looking at particular topic areas within this. But I'll touch a little bit more on those specific topic areas in the next slide. And then please go back, Anushka. Great. And then, so now once we've generated the research, and even while it's being generated in some cases, we at JPAL are looking to support researchers and practitioners in bringing the lessons learned from the Learning for All initiative into the policy space, which is sort of the other aspect of LAI. And also importantly, none of this would be possible without our wealth of donors, which you'll see here at the bottom of the slide. Great. Next slide, please. Okay, so as previewed, there are certain areas within the Learning for All initiative that we're focused on. And before starting, I just want to mention that I strongly encourage everyone to take a really deep look at the research agenda, which will be posted on our LAI RFP webpage when the initiative officially launches for our second round on October 10th. And that will go in much more detail than I'll go here on each of these various topics, as well as discuss some more cross-cutting themes. So to start, LAI would like to generate research in the area of foundational learning, including foundational literacy and numeracy, which we've seen to be central in helping develop higher order skills necessary to succeed in other parts of curriculum and later life outcomes, such as income, productivity, and health. So we're looking for specific research in that area, with also a focus in sort of like the pedagogical practices in that area that we've seen in some of like basic, some of our recent policy papers and publications within JPAL and then outside of JPAL, such as like the GEEP report. Additionally, like to that same end, we're also interested in foundational learning in terms of socio-emotional or what is considered like holistic skills or breadth of skills. And that includes abilities and skills such as like cognitive and social, emotional, creative, and physical skills. And while we know that there's some evidence that these abilities can help overcome adversity and help them contribute positively to society, and are also associated with later life outcomes such as increased health, there's still limited evidence on the impact of socio-emotional learning across various global contexts. And so to support the expansion of such research, we're going to be open up in this RFP. And then along with the research agenda that we post, we're also releasing a holistic skills measurement review, which will also be able to be found on our website. Other areas of research will include girls' education, where we hope to find programs and mechanisms which address the disproportionate barriers that girls face in terms of enrollment and attendance, completion, and gender-based discrimination. Additionally, we're interested in research at the intersection of climate and education, which is a relatively newer area for us. And as we see the events like fires and droughts and floods propagate and intensify around the world, we want to explore how access to quality education might allow children to develop a broad set of skills that help adapt, learn, and thrive despite an increasingly volatile environments. And as of now, there's limited rigorous evidence on the ways in which education systems can adapt to change into these changing environments. But we're really eager to see what creative research this might attract to help address these challenges. And lastly, we'll be looking at interventions that explore long-term impacts of education and looking at outcomes such as like economic well-being and health to help us tease out how education can help contribute to individuals' well-being later on. Great, next slide, please. So just to quickly go through some of the actual different funding options. First, we have like a full research project. And these grants are for research projects at a very mature level of development, meaning the applicants at this stage should have a clear research question and be able to demonstrate the relationship and commitment with an implementing partner, and have technical questions answered, such as those regarding method of randomization and power calculations. Next, we have our pilot research projects, and these grants are for studies that are a little less mature and that they might have a clear research question, but there's interest to further test the design and implementation. And the expectation is that these projects will ultimately develop into a full randomized evaluation. And last, along these types of research grants, we also have travel and proposal development grants. And these cover more exploratory work related to preliminary research ideas, such as conducting background research, developing partnerships, visiting field sites, or collecting preliminary data. Okay, next slide, please. Interestingly, for LAI, we're now open to Path to Scale grants as well, which aim to build a more solid foundation for successful programs to influence policy. So these P2S grants aim to support the expansion of successful programs, as I mentioned, and are really grounded in the recognition that harnessing evidence across different contexts involves really understanding the context and systems involved in each individual place, especially as you move from a smaller area to a larger area or across different regions. So the activities that are involved in these grants, I won't go into each of them specifically, but they involve both research and technical support. And like the most important thing here is that these grants are focused on projects where there's a solid foundation of existing evidence. And with that, they're based in a previous randomized evaluation. So if you have any like specific questions about these grants, don't hesitate to reach out to LAI. Okay. Thank you, perfect. And now, as previously mentioned, it's really central to our mission at JPAL to support the implementing organizations and policymakers and practitioners in the process from learning from one another. So in addition to running our funding rounds and related activities, the JPAL Ed team will be working to synthesize and communicate findings from evaluations funded by LAI. And examples of how we've done this in the past can be found on our LAI website. And now I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you, Demi. I'm now going to be going over just an overview of the African Scholars Program. So in order to be eligible to apply as a regional scholar under the LAI initiative, you need to have already completed a PhD in a social science field with substantial quantitative experience. You also currently need to be based at an academic institution in sub-Saharan Africa. That being said, only one person on the project team needs to fulfill this definition. For example, if there are 3 or 4 academics or primary investigators on the research team, only one of them needs to meet the eligibility criteria in order for the team to be able to apply. Additionally, we welcome interdisciplinary teams with multiple researchers and co-PIs from different disciplines and backgrounds. There are 2 types of funding that you will be able to apply for: proposal development grants of up to $10,000 and pilot studies of up to $75,000. Scholars who successfully complete a pilot funded by JPAL are then eligible to apply for full randomized evaluation funding of up to $400,000. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. Targeted mentorship will be provided to all regional scholars who receive LAI funding, and this mentorship will be extended the length of the entire project. Mentors can be JPAL affiliated professors or invited researchers, and scholars may either identify a mentor themselves or staff can facilitate this partnership. Each research team will develop and sign an agreement with their mentor outlining how they want to work together, but the general expectation is that the team will meet with mentors about once a month. The mentorship component is intended as a way to advise on the design of a specific randomized evaluation in the ideation and piloting phases. To summarize, mentors will provide guidance while allowing the scholars to drive their own research agenda and have full ownership of the project. I want to highlight that mentors are not co-authors. They are someone to come to for advice and provide friendly guidance, just like your senior member of an academic department would. You might jointly decide to co-author down the line, as we have happened, as it happened in the past. But this is a decision that you can come to together, and it is not an expectation of JPAL on our side. I'd now like to hand over to Claire.
Awesome. Thanks, Raquel. I just want to apologize in advance if I start to cough. I have a bit of a cold and sometimes the coughing takes over, but I'll power through hopefully. So I'd like to just take you through a few tips for putting together an application, which we hope you will do either in this first round request for proposals or another one soon. So I'll take you through these points here, which is, what are we looking for in a strong proposal? So it needs to be based on a strong research idea, have a clear pathway to a randomized evaluation because we're JPAL and that's what we fund and work on. It must follow the application guidelines and be simple, succinct, and clearly written. So I'll just say a little bit more about each of those points. All right, so what makes a strong research idea? Firstly, it has to be academically interesting. So at its core, JPAL, as you saw at the beginning, is a network of researchers. And so the research we want to fund and implement is adding to the body of knowledge. It's aware of the most current findings and adding to that body of knowledge on a particular topic. So that's what academically interesting means. Equally important is that it needs to be policy relevant. So there's a lot of academic work that's worthwhile to do, but may not speak necessarily immediately to policy. JPAL wants to fund academic work that speaks to policy, so that can be useful to policymakers to inform their decision-making, can identify ways to solve problems that governments are concerned with, etc. So always think to yourself, are you adding knowledge are you adding something to the current body of knowledge, but are you also producing something that a policymaker would find relevant and useful? The third point is maybe goes without saying, but it has to fit within the LAI research agenda. And so we would just, here, what I would encourage you strongly to do is to refer to all of the guidance on the LAI website about what research they want to fund, what their key questions are. So we've already talked a bit about that here. But when you're doing your proposal, we really recommend you look at that carefully and see if your idea fits with that. And don't try and crowbar an idea in that doesn't really fit. That will be picked up by the review board and your proposal is very unlikely to be successful. So you'll have an idea, but just check that it really fits with the LAI scope. And then lastly, because as I said, we're JPAL and we fund impact evaluations, specifically randomized evaluations, we are interested in cause and effect questions specifically. So if I do X, so if I implement this program, what will the effect be? All right, next slide. So I said at the beginning, there needs to be a clear pathway to a randomized evaluation. Again, because we're JPAL and that's our area of expertise. So what that practically means is that the proposal needs to include a possible program. So it might be that you have an idea or there is an idea and it's not yet in existence, but that there needs to be a program that could be in existence. That you would then be implementing. So specifically, we talk about programs, but we also call them interventions or planned interventions. And what is clear here, what I need to stress here is that this needs to either be a brand new program, something that doesn't yet exist, or it needs to be a new adaptation to an existing program. So we cannot fund evaluations that look at a program that's already been implemented for some amount of time, because then that access to the program is highly unlikely to have been randomized, and then you cannot evaluate it with a randomized evaluation. For a pilot, you need to show, I'll mention this again just now, but you need to show that there's some buy-in from the implementing partner, so from the organization that's actually going to deliver the intervention, and a description of how that pilot will lead to and assist with a larger randomized evaluation. So the goal in your proposals, although the initial proposals open to African scholars who haven't yet been funded by JPAL are for proposal development grants and pilots, it must always be clear how your work will lead to a full randomized evaluation, because that's where we want you to get to. All right, next slide. Okay, so we're also looking for proposals that are simple, succinct, and clearly written. So there's always a bit of a tension between being as concise as possible and being as comprehensive as possible. So we acknowledge that, but we do try and encourage people to write as simply and directly as possible. So what, like parts of the things that'll assist with that. So build a strong structure before you start writing. Our proposals do have outlined sections, so the structure is not entirely up to you, but within each section, you build a strong idea of how you'll make a case for that particular section. Use a clear title. Shorter is better, but that's not important. More important is just that it's clear what you're answering. Important point here is to be careful when citing related literature. So that is a section of a proposal, particularly the pilot, a slightly longer, more in-depth proposal. And it's very important that you indicate that you understand what the current body of knowledge is, where that understanding is at the moment, so up-to-date knowledge of the literature. And that you can therefore say why your project is particularly interesting or relevant, how it's going to build on the literature, how it's going to add to it, answer a gap that exists. At the same time, don't reference every paper that could possibly be relevant. That will take too long. Don't go too far back into the past. If there's, very recent literature, strong literature on this topic, that's where you should focus. And you're looking at education, the body of literature and education is vast. You should focus on the section of that literature that speaks directly to the program that you would want to implement. And then lastly, you're doing this project because there's some unanswered question and you want to answer it. So there is a gap, something in the literature that's not there. But be very careful about not disparaging what has been done before, to say like, look, it was weak and now I'm coming in to solve that. Rather stress that your project builds on it and kind of adds to the body of knowledge as opposed to sort of correcting necessarily what happened before. Use clear and concise language. They always think to yourself, could somebody not in your field understand what you're getting at? If yes, you've done it right. If no, you need to simplify. And then review your own proposal, but also ask others to review it. And not people in your team, someone outside of your team, ideally someone outside of your field, your specific field, so you can tell if you've explained it in a way that is simple and clear enough. All right. And now this sounds like an obvious thing to say, but sometimes some of the application guidelines are not followed in full. And then that can either cause delays. We have to come back to teams and ask them to resubmit, or it can, if really not followed very well, sort of counter proposal out without too much review because you've missed too many of the requirements. So under proposal development grant, that smaller grant, you've got to give a concise statement of your topic. What's the problem that you're trying to address? If you have some idea of implementing partners, you would talk about them. You may not yet have that. That's normal at that stage. You may not have it, but if you do, you would talk about them. And then you would clearly indicate the scope and the sequencing of the activities. Often proposal development grants are around travel to areas you want to study, meeting with partners, meeting with government policymakers, that kind of thing, scoping the project, developing the idea. So you would lay that out, and you will have to submit a budget, but it's like a relatively short and simple budget. With a pilot grant, the proposal is a bit more in depth because you're asking for more money and it's a bigger project. So you'd have a proposal narrative, and that has quite a few different things that you need to remember in it. So you start with a problem statement. What is the problem that your intervention would be trying to solve? What's your unique contribution to the literature? So that's what I mentioned just now. You need to lay out the theory of change of your intervention. So why do you think implementing your program will lead to a certain outcome? How will that come about? Who is your target population? Again, I can stress what's the policy relevance, like why would the findings of this matter to the government? You would lay out treatment arms. Even if you're not yet going to implement an RCT, you would still say in the full RCT, we would implement these treatment arms. You would describe how it might be done. And then what kind of outcomes are you measuring, and who your partners are. And lastly, we just have a slide there with some useful resources to guide your writing and your thinking. JPAL's research resources have much more than just sort of proposal writing guidance type of content. There's a lot in there, budgeting, surveys, etc. And then there's a few other sources for advice on how to write. And then the last link there is just, I'm sure you've looked at our website, but really looking at the range of projects that we funded gets you an idea, gives you ideas of what we're looking for, the kind of research that we're interested in funding. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you, Claire. Okay, next slide, please. So now I'm just gonna talk a little bit about sort of what the next steps are, and sort of what to be looking out for as we go forward. So the first thing is that the application for JPAL will open up, and for the whole RFP will open up on October 10th. So coming up soon. And then at that point, we'll have updated our website with our updated research agenda, our holistic skills measurement piece, and there'll be more details about eligibility and going into depth of the different research topics. Then the first sort of like due date is the letter of interest deadline, which will be November 7th. And then after that, there will be, what will happen is once your letter of interest is sent in, it will be reviewed amongst our team at JPAL with our co-chairs. And this will allow us to determine whether or not it's eligible to go to the next round. And if you are approved to submit a proposal, then you'll have a call with our LAI team to discuss more details about the proposal. And then the actual proposal submission will be on December 13th. And then after that, your proposal will be reviewed internally as well as by 2 academic peer reviewers, which will be then followed by a review by our review board, which contains senior level academics, including our co-chairs, and then some policy people. And then following that, if your proposal receives funding, then you'll be matched with a mentor from the JPAL network. And I should say that the submission or the announcements of whether or not your proposal has been accepted and that you receive funding will be likely in February 2024. And then once you've been matched with a mentor of the JPAL network, and your proposal is finalized, you will engage in your research, and our team will be in touch about the process of the development of the research, and we'll be keeping contact to track the progress of results and looking to support where we can help bring these findings to policy. Next slide, please. So this is just another visual of some of the key dates that I just discussed and some of the more immediate ones, including the RFP opening, the LOI, and the full proposal due date. And then I also want to mention here that we'll be running proposals twice a year. And so potentially if you're not able to apply this round, we'll have another round that will open in the spring of next year. Next slide, please. Great. And then finally here, there are some additional resources about the African Scholars Program where you can learn more about eligibility. And yeah, I think that's it from me. So we can go ahead and open it up for questions.
Sounds good. So if any of you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you. Or if you want to just leave your question in the Q&A, we could also address it from there.
Anushka, there was one question in the chat around will attendees get these slides and webinar recording via email? And maybe you can talk through where these will be posted and how they can see them afterward.
Yes, absolutely. So we are recording the webinar, as you can see, and we will be posting it on the African Scholars Opportunity page on our website. And I can also drop a link here. So the recording and the slides will be posted there for anybody's reference if you want to go back to the slides or the recording later.
Hi, Anushka. I was wondering maybe I could invite Mohammed to unmute. He posted a question: can the research team partner with a private school to do the research, or the supervisory organization need to be involved? And I asked what the supervisory organization was, and Mohammed said it could be, for example, the Ghanaian Education Service. So Mohammed, I was just wondering, are you asking, is it possible to include them, or are you saying, do you have to include them? Is it a requirement? I'm just not sure which way your question was going. You are able to unmute. Maybe Anushka, we can go to someone else, and Mohammed can answer in the chat.
Sure. Ali, do you have a question?
Yes. So if I apply for the proposal development and I'm successful with my team, is it possible to follow that to be able to secure the pilot's grant with this same window, or would have to now wait for the next window in spring 2024 before we can get funding for pilot studies?
Yeah, I can come in here if that sounds good. That's a really great question. And the latter is correct. So you can apply for one per round. And so if you're going to apply for proposal development grant in, say, this round, then you could apply for the pilot grant, say, the following round. Of course, it would be hopeful that you would have like the results of the proposal development from that first round while you're applying for the pilot. Great question, thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Mary from Kenya. I work with Kenyatta University and I'm in the School of Education. Now, I wanted to find out whether there are possibilities of cross-country partnerships if I can be able to do a proposal in the area of interest with another organization in another university in another country. As an African scholar, I can partner with another organization, like a university in another country.
Yes, absolutely, Mary. The only eligibility criteria that we have is one person on the team who would be the primary PI should basically fulfill the eligibility criteria, as we mentioned on one of our slides, but you are free to partner with organizations across different countries and between like different kinds of organizations if you think that that would add more value to your proposal.
Okay, and the PI must be the African scholar.
Yes, one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I ask a question, please? My name is Nena Leboni from also Kenya. Now, I know, of course, JPAL does not fund interventions, and they expect partners to do that. Now, you notice that in Africa, education is closely controlled by the government. So must we, when you are developing a proposal, have the intervention the intervention partner to be necessarily a government entity like a Ministry of Education or a government, a Ministry of Education agency or a department or something like that? Or what kind of partners do you envisage for researchers in the projects that are funded under the LAI initiative? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can start answering that, and then anyone else can feel free to chime in. Thanks so much for that question. So it doesn't, and I guess the question here would be like, what is the sort of typical implementing partner that we might expect an African scholar or other researchers to work with? And that would include, like you said, it could be like a government partner, but it also can include like a different sort of a non-governmental organization or any organization that's implementing a specific program that would be interested in determining the outcomes that our researchers are then interested in under LAI. So we've seen various different levels of organization, like a much smaller implementing partner up to like a larger implementing partner that might span multiple different countries. So there can be like a vast range here.
Okay, thank you very much. Well guided.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yeah, I have two questions that I want to clarify. The first one is about a PhD candidate that is in our institution. If the athlete, JPAL athlete, is not in Africa and the PhD candidate want to apply, is the person, the PhD JPAL athlete who is not in African institution qualified with the PhD candidate? That is my first question. The second question has to do with in terms of partnership. If it happens that you are going to do the research with a private school, and that particular private school has a supervisory, the network. Hello?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can
so
hear you,
if it
ma'am.
happens, yeah, if it happens that that private school is having a supervisory body, like in Ghana, we have the Ghana Education Service, we have the National Inspectorate Body for the schools. So if I am going to get a partnership, did I need to get a partnership letter from the school as well as the supervisory body, or if I get any one of them, it will work for me?
I can come in and try to answer your second question. So to be eligible, researchers must be based at an academic institution, and typically researchers or research teams will partner with governments or other implementing partners to evaluate their programs. So your question was if you would need a letter of support from the Ghana Education Service. I think I would say at the letter of interest stage, we evaluate the strength of partnership. So if the Ghana Education Service or GES is really relevant to your project in Ghana, it would probably reflect well on your application to have their buy-in for the evaluation. But we sort of evaluate by application which sort of partnerships you as the research team kind of know would be necessary to be able to carry out the evaluation. And I don't know, Claire, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think you got it all.
Yeah, and I guess on the first part of the question about the PhD student, like I said before, only one person on the team needs to meet the eligibility criteria of already having a PhD, but somebody who has a PhD can definitely partner with a current PhD student.
I'm called Gonzaga Kaswara from Uganda. Now, I wanted to know on the research review board, are we supposed to use the research review board of the institution or the university that is applying for the research proposal or for JPAL? And also, the other clarity I wanted is in regards to the already interventions that have been implemented. What should be the period when they were last implemented for you to be able to apply an RCT on them to see the causal effect of such an intervention? Over.
I can volunteer to answer the second question. So with an RCT, you've got two options for what can be RCT'd. You either have a program, a school program, whatever it is, new textbooks, teacher training, etc., that has never been delivered before, and you come along with that implementing body, whoever it is, the government, a school, etc., and you with them randomly allocate people to receive the program or not from scratch. Alternatively, there could be an existing program, say it's a teacher training program that's been running for a number of years, but now you're bringing in an innovation, you're changing the way that the training is delivered, you're changing the duration, whatever it is, something new is happening that has not happened before. And then you can randomize who receives that new version and who doesn't. So the absolute key thing you just always have to keep in mind is how is it decided who got the program? Unless you are building in a randomized evaluation from the beginning, it is 99.9% certain that who got allocated to receive the program and who didn't is not random. You targeted a certain type of person, it was implemented in one state and not another state, etc. Not random. So you need to just ask yourself, were the people who received the program randomly selected to receive it? And if the answer is no, you cannot do an RCT. And so that's why we stress that it needs to be a new program or a new version of a program. And you're right there at the beginning, randomly selecting those who receive it and those who don't. I hope that answers your question. And I think the first one was about IRBs. I'm going to give my answer, but if I'm incorrect, I encourage others to chip in. The IRB board that you go through, it usually is the IRB board of the university that one or more of the PIs is based at. There's no requirement from our side that it has to be that. There is a requirement that the IRB board has to have IORG status, be registered as an IRB, but with a body in the US. We will provide information on what this means, exactly what that registration status means. But what we have to note is that many IRB boards in Africa don't yet have this registration status. They can get it. It's not out of bounds. Some do have it, but many do not. And so the key thing is to check, do they have the status? And as I said, we can provide more information in a follow-up email about this. So I'm providing vague information now because we can provide more detail in an email, but that is the key requirement. And if you cannot access one at a university that has the status, there are some commercial options, which we can also provide information on, but then because they're commercial, you will have to pay for it. And those fees can be included in a budget to JPAL. So if you put forward a budget for 75,000 and you allocate 2,000 of it to IRB fees, that's a perfectly permissible expense. But you must include it in your budget and not come afterwards. You know, we've given you the funding, we've said here's 75,000, and then you come back and say, now can you give me an extra 2,000? That is not possible. So you need to work out the status, and if you need to pay for the IRB process, you need to include it in the budget that you submit to us with your full proposal. That's a great
awesome
question because the IRB thing is important. Sorry, David. Please go
No,
ahead.
no, thank you so much. That was great. The only thing I was gonna add is that there must be a PI at the institute that is receiving the award, and that institution must also be on the IRB protocol. So just to add on to that, Claire, but no, thank you so much.
Sorry, go ahead.
We have a program, an RCT that we are piloting. It has been on for 2 years. And I was asking whether this funding phase can fund upscaling. We are working with the government, the county government, and we are piloting the RC design in the ECD level. Can we use it to upscale depending on the effect sizes?
Yeah, I would say that in the interest of time, we can address like any specific project or proposal related questions in an email, and would like to keep like questions right now more general. So we can maybe talk about your specific case through an email, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Hello.
that's fine. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Perez.
What I wanted to know is that suppose somebody wants to do extensive reading and develop a proposal that can then move to a pilot, develop a proposal and which can then lead to pilot. At the initial level of submitting the letter of interest, does the person need to have constituted the full research team? Because sometimes as the proposal is developing is when you actually realize the different areas of expertise that needs to come into the research work. So I've posted it there in the chat. You could help us with the response to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can come in here if you want, Anushka, and then maybe to add. I would say for the most part, we'd like at the time that the LOI is due for the research project to be mostly fleshed out. And And so the kind of sort of like the month period in between when the research project opens to when the LOIs are due, we're hoping that a lot of that sort of development will have happened and that you'll have a good understanding of who will be on the team. However, if there's like some, minor shift in who is decided to be on that team between when the LOI is due and the full proposal, then I think it would be fine to add additional people at that stage. But for the most part, the idea should be relatively fleshed out at the LOI phase, including who will be on the team. But of course, we don't want to detract from, including additional people and having, making the project even better. So do keep that in mind. And if it comes up during the process, don't hesitate also to reach out to us at the LAI at Poverty Action Lab email to make sure.
Thanks, Demi. Sigaya, am I saying your name correctly? Sigai?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm from Ethiopia. I have few questions. The first one is, I think it has been raised indirectly by other participants. It's a question of type of intervention that this program support or fund an intervention that is already on progress, but it's not investigated so far by other scholars for other purpose. So this is my concern. That means the program is on some progress. It's already started. And the participants are already selected based on some randomized criteria. But there is no study conducted on the actual impact of the program. And the other question is on the second type of application, that is application for a pilot study. If I'm not mistaken, one of the criteria is that we need to issue, or the applicant need to issue a letter from a supporting or a partner. So I'm a bit confused with that. Is that necessary to have a letter of support from the one that is working with us, or maybe the institutional level? So that is my concern. Thank you.
Do what I did before and answer the second question first. And I hope I answered correctly, and you can just tell me if I haven't. The letter of support from the implementing partner, whoever is the implementing partner, private school, public school, government department, NGO, etc., is very important because it indicates that the project is feasible, meaning that the partner is committed to delivering an intervention. They understand that they need to deliver it in a way that allows you to randomly assign who receives the program or not, maintain fidelity to the treatment, how it's delivered. If you've decided you're training teachers in a certain way, that they keep training the teachers in that way and they don't change tack halfway through. Basically, it indicates that these people are fully bought onto the project and want to work with you to implement the intervention in a way that allows you to evaluate it. And so it is very important because it indicates feasibility. And so review boards are looking at, like, is this academically interesting? Is it policy relevant? And I should have said this, is it something that's actually going to be able to be done in reality? And if you don't have buy-in from the implementing partner, I mean, that is where many projects that do get funded still can fall apart, that the implementing partner pulls out for some reason. So we kind of want as much indication as possible that they're on board and working with you. And I have no memory of what your first question was, so I'm hoping Demi or Anushka do.
I think that I will at least try, and then if there's something wrong here, we can hopefully come address it either now or like in a follow-up over email or in the chat. But I believe what the question was is, if there has been a program that's been rolled out in a randomized way, but doesn't have an evaluation set up around it, would it be possible to apply for funding to evaluate it in that case? And I think it's one of the questions that I don't want to dive too deeply into, because I think it will be a really like case-by-case basis. But in general, the if the randomization was set up with the intention of an evaluation, but maybe it's like the second half of funding that is needed. So potentially there was like a baseline conducted and it was set up in a way that was intended to be randomized and evaluated in this way. There's like a potential case there, but I don't want to set up a criteria of saying yes or no without taking a look at the particular instance.
Thanks, Demi. Al Hassan, would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, hello.
Hi, we
I
can hear
wanted to
you.
know in the proposal stage, do we still need, is the requirement regarding the partners letter, is it still a match requirement? Because in the proposal stage, you are still at least coming out with an idea, going around for feasibility to see whether your idea would be good. So does the implementing partner letter, request for their letter, is it much necessary in that stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's not required. If you do have some form of a relationship already, then I would encourage you to include it. But as you say, exactly as you say, often this proposal development grant is used to develop that relationship, to get enough sort of quite like preliminary data and information that you think there's something there that you then could submit a proposal for a pilot. So no, not strictly necessary. If you have it, do include it, but you don't need to if you don't have it. Maybe we could go to Lucy. I think her hand has been up a long time.
Yeah. Lucy, do you want to unmute? I see that you're unmuted.
We can't hear you yet, Lucy, if you are speaking.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go to... Okay, yeah, let's go with I'm sorry, Mohammed again. Lucy, maybe put your question in the chat if we hear you. Yes, Mohammed, sorry, go ahead.
Just a follow-up question to the one who said about the partnership letter. Yeah, I don't know whether there is a requirement before you submit the application, or one can submit the application letter, provide the partnership letter.
Are you talking about for a pilot specifically?
Yep, for a pilot.
Yeah, so if you're submitting a proposal for a pilot and you're at the point where you're submitting the full proposal, not the letter of interest. So at the letter of interest stage, you don't need to submit a letter of support. At the full proposal stage, so 4 to 6 weeks later, you will need to submit that with your proposal. You could either be, your proposal will be not successful out of kind of automatically not successful if it doesn't include that, or there'll be big questions. And I would just like to say, we expect LAI to receive a lot of proposals. So that means that there's limited capacity to have a lot of back and forth with teams if we think there are errors or omissions in their proposals that they submit. So I would encourage you to really make sure you submit the full and complete proposal from scratch. And if you think this is something you won't yet have now for this round, but you will early next year, then maybe just wait till early next year when you can also submit the letters of support along with the proposal, because they are important for pilots.
Thank you so much. So I'm Rose Opio from Kenya. Sorry, I think I'm happy to be here, and I have 2 questions. I think maybe I didn't get the last one. Is there a template that will help us understand how big the letter of interest is? That is one. And then the last one is on the second question is on levels of decision making or implementing partners you want to partner. For example, in Kenya, there are 2 levels of decision making and, of course, implementing partners. If you're working in the early childhood ecosystem, the devolved affair is in the county. And then again, we also have the national government. So if you are supposed to provide a letter of partnership, of implementing partner, would you still stop at the local levels, or must you go the national partnership way?
I can come in for the first question. And so in terms of like templates or like reference applications, there are templates and reference applications that will be on the RFP webpage for LAI, which I'm sending right now in the chat. But two caveats here. One, this is the application template for our first RFP, not this one. But the templates will be updated on October 10th with the release of the RFP. So you can go from there. However, I'll say that there's no guidance specifically on how long the letters of support should be, but I'll just say here generally that we've seen them be about a page. So I hope that's helpful.
We're at time, but maybe we can quickly take one or two more questions.
Yes, this is Dr. Aliata from Kenya, Tom Mboya University. I wanted to find out, is there a requirement as regards to the minimum or maximum number of members in a team that are putting up the proposal? Thank you.
I'll just come in to say no. There's neither. Besides making sure that you have an eligible applicant.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
That's
So
fine.
thank you so much, everybody. We are 4 minutes over time, but thank you so much for such an active participation. It was wonderful to talk with some of you today, and we have the email that I think most of you got, lai@povertyactionlab.org. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them across our side, and we can get back to the questions that we did not get to address in the call today. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for your time, and we hope to receive your proposals.
Thank you, everyone.